السلام الأتمان الأكملان على خير خلق الله أجمعين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وأرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه واجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. وبعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We're going to repeat some of the ahadith from last time because there was a problem with the connection. It wasn't, the live connection got cut off. So last time we had, we were on hadith number 54. Hadith number 54. This hadith is narrated by Amr ibn Shu'ayb عن أبيه عن جده. Amr ibn Shu'ayb عن أبيه عن جده. And this is a very famous chain of narration where you have a father narrating from, or you have a son narrating from the father, and that father narrates from his grandfather. That father narrates from his grandfather. So you have Amr narrating from his father, Shu'ayb. And this Shu'ayb narrates from his grandfather, who was a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. Who was that? That was Abdullah ibn Amr radiyallahu anhu. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. And this hadith is in Sunan Abi Dawud and al-Nasa'i. He says, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من تطبب ولم يعلم منه طب فهو ضامن. من تطبب ولم يعلم منه طب فهو ضامن. Although the hadith is considered by many scholars as being weak, the Prophet ﷺ says, whoever practices medicine and treats people, and yet he was not known for being skilled in medicine, he's not a professional, then he is liable. He is liable, meaning if something goes wrong, then he is liable for that. He is liable for that. Whether he makes the person more sick, whether he gives him a defect that remains with him for the rest of his life, or whether it leads to him dying, whether it leads to the patient dying, he is liable. He is liable and he is responsible. And this is a general rule. The Shaykh says this is a general rule with regards to all trades and all professions. If someone does something, he makes it seem to the people that he's a professional in something, but yet he's not, then he's liable if something goes wrong. And this is because the Prophet ﷺ says, مَنْ غَشَّنَا فَلَيْسَ مِنَّا. Whoever cheats us Muslims, then he is not one of us. And that's exactly what this person is doing, right? That's exactly what he's doing. He's making it seem as if he's a professional, right? He'll even perhaps doctor fake certificates and degrees, and he'll make it seem as if he's a professional. If something goes wrong, then he's liable. And they say that what this also means is that if someone finds out, if the patient or the customer finds out that he's not a professional, he can go and ask for his money back, and he has to give it back. He has to give it back. And the Shaykh mentions what this hadith also proves is the opposite. Meaning, if a person is a professional, right? He is a professional, and something goes wrong, not due to negligence, right? He did what he could. Let's say a doctor, right? He was not negligent, and it leads to someone's death, but not out of negligence. Then he is not liable. Then in this case, he is not liable. But as we said, this is if he is not negligent. If he's negligent, even if he's a professional, he is liable. The next hadith is the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, and this is in at-Tirmidhi. قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ادرأوا الحدود عن المسلمين ما استطعتم فإن كان له مخرج فخلوا سبيله فإن الإمام أن يخطئ في العفو خير من أن يخطئ في العقوبة. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم says, avert the hudud, the prescribed punishments of Allah. Avoid them, avert them from the Muslims as much as you are able to do so, to the best of your ability. If there is a way out for this person who is accused of committing a certain crime, if there is a way out for him, then let him go. If you can find a way out for him, then let him go. For it is far better for the Muslim leader or judge to make a mistake in pardoning than for him to make a mistake in carrying out the punishment. So basically here the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, giving us a golden rule. And this is actually one of the rules in the Sharia. Dar al-hudud bil-shubuhat. To avoid the hudud, the prescribed punishments of Allah, due to there being doubts. Meaning, first of all, what are hudud? Hudud are those punishments that Allah has outlined in the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ mentioned for certain crimes. Right? So for example, for zina, there's a certain punishment in this dunya. For murder, there's a certain punishment in this dunya. For theft, likewise. For drinking alcohol, likewise. And so on and so forth. These are the hudud, the prescribed punishments of Allah. If someone is brought before a Muslim judge, accused of a certain crime, we have to look for as many possibilities that he did not commit the crime. It shouldn't be the opposite way around, where we're rushing to find the person guilty. And just due to accusations, we're saying the person's guilty. Right? Instead, we have to leave no door unclosed. We have to investigate. We have to do our due diligence. And then we have to, even put possibilities out there that maybe this person didn't know, even if he did commit the crime. Maybe he was ignorant. Maybe he's a new Muslim and he doesn't know. Right? We have to look for as many excuses as we can. And let the person go if we don't have solid proof which is based on certainty and 100% yaqeen. Right? Not only that the person committed it, but that he has no excuse. Sometimes a person, it's clear he committed a certain crime, but there could be other reasons for why we don't apply the punishment. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ explains why. He explains why. Because here you have two scenarios, or you have two possibilities. One possibility, that you let him go while he deserved the punishment. You let him go while he deserved the punishment. The other possibility is that you inflict the punishment while he did not deserve it. Right? So you have these two scenarios. that are before the Muslim judge, right? If I let him go, there's a possibility he deserved it and the possibility he did not deserve it, right? If I punish him, carry out the punishment, there's a possibility he deserved it and there's a possibility he did not deserve it, right? So if we go ahead with the punishment, and let's say it turns out later on that he did not deserve to be punished due to one reason or the other, then that is far worse than if you were to let him go. And even if there was a possibility he deserved to be punished. Right? Does it make sense? Right? And you know, this shows us the justice of Islam. Right? This shows us the justice of Islam and how Islam is based, how our Sharia is based on the concept of ease and flexibility and not harshness, right? And this is because the life of a Muslim is precious and his honor is precious, right? And we see so many cases today here in the West of how there are people, you know, who years later, you know, sometimes 20, 30 years later, it turns out after further investigation, the person was not guilty of the crime that he was accused of, and they gave him a life sentence for it. He's rotting in jail for the last 20, 30 years, and it turns out he was innocent. Multiple times we have seen this, right? Sometimes a person will die in prison and later on it turns out that he was innocent, right? And so this shows us the justice of Islam. And the Shaykh mentions that here, from this hadith, we have a very golden rule in the Sharia, which is when we have two evils, we go for the lesser of the two evils. When we have two evils, we go for the lesser of the two evils. So here, you have two evils, two potential evils. One, that you let him go and he actually deserved the punishment. That's evil, right? The other option is that you carry out the punishment, but he did not deserve it. That's also evil. Which one is the greater of the two evils? Which is the greater of the two evils? To punish him when he didn't deserve to be punished. Right? To punish him when he did not deserve to be punished. But obviously, all of this, as we said, does not mean that we now never apply the hudud of Allah. Right? No. We have the example where, you know, the Prophet ﷺ, there was a woman from Quraysh, from one of the noble families of Quraysh who stole. She was caught for theft. And the people said, we cannot apply the punishment on her, she's from a noble family. And this was when they had just become Muslim. We're talking about Mecca. We're talking about when the Prophet ﷺ conquered Mecca and entered. And now everyone accepted Islam. These people were new Muslims. So some of them were saying, we can't apply the punishment on her. Right? And they tried to look for someone who could go and convey this to the Prophet ﷺ, to let her off. They found Usama ibn Zayd for this job. He went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, you know, why don't we let her off? And the Prophet ﷺ got extremely angry. He got extremely angry. And he said, by Allah, if my own daughter Fatima was to steal, I would chop off her hand. Right? So it shows us that, yes, on the one hand, we take every precaution to avoid applying the hudud, where there's a possibility that the person does not deserve it, but at the same time, it doesn't mean we completely abandon applying the hudud of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next hadith is a hadith of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu, and this is in Bukhari and Muslim, it's agreed upon. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا طاعة في معصية إنما الطاعة في المعروف. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم says there is no obedience in disobedience, but rather obedience is only to be in that which is good. Obedience should only be in that which is good. And so what the Prophet ﷺ is saying here is that Allah has made certain people to have the authority to be obeyed. Right? So, an Amir of the Muslims, any Muslim leader who has authority over the Muslims, we're supposed to obey him. Our parents, we're supposed to obey them. The wife is supposed to obey the husband. Right? And so on and so forth. There are certain people who we have to obey. However, the obedience of Allah and His Messenger override all other obedience. Overrides every other obedience. So when there is a conflict between the obedience of Allah and the obedience of one of these people, we give precedence to whose obedience? The obedience of Allah and His Messenger. That's what the Prophet ﷺ is saying here. He says there is no obedience in disobedience, meaning in the disobedience of Allah. In the disobedience of Allah and His Messenger. Because the Messenger ﷺ does not command anything except that it is from the obedience of Allah. So what that means is if, for example, let's say a Muslim ruler says that I don't want people to be fasting Ramadan. Why? Because it reduces productivity. It reduces productivity. People become lazy. People are not able to work when they're fasting all day. So the Muslims who live under that leadership, are they allowed to obey the leader? No. They have to actually disobey him, no matter what the consequences. If a leader says no one's allowed to pray 5 times a day and he closes all the masajid, do we obey him? No. If the leader comes around forcing people to drink alcohol, should he be obeyed? No. He must be disobeyed. He must be disobeyed. Likewise, if, let's say, a father tells his son, I don't want you to, let's say, I don't want you to grow a beard. I want you to shave your beard. Should he be obeyed? No, because the Prophet ﷺ commanded the men to grow their beards. And so on and so forth. If a husband tells his wife, I don't want you to wear a hijab when you go out, should she obey him? No. Although all of these people must be obeyed. Right? But the Prophet ﷺ said, in what should they be obeyed? He said, إِنَّمَا الطَّاعَةُ فِي الْمَعْرُوفِ. They should only be obeyed in that which is right. Meaning, in that which falls under the teachings of Allah, the teachings of Islam. Right? So, what this means is, if Allah commands us to do something and forbids us from something else, then there is no option to obey anyone else in that. However, If something is optional and not mandatory, then that is a completely different scenario. For example, fasting Mondays and Thursdays is sunnah, right? Let's say there's a wife, she wants to fast Monday. The husband says, you're not going to fast today. What should she do here? Does she have to obey him, or does she say, no, I'm going to disobey you because, this is a good deed I want to do? She has to obey. Why?
Obey him is better than doing the sunnah.
Obedience to the husband is fard, but the siyam is not.
Okay. Yes, basically, she has to obey him, and that is fard. And the fasting, it's optional, right? The fasting here is not something Allah has mandated. It's not a fard, it's not a wajib, right? And so on and so forth. And so on and so forth. But obviously, even our obedience, we have to do it to the best of our abilities, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ says in another hadith, عَلَيْكُمْ السَّمْعُ وَالطَّاعَةُ فِي مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. You have to listen and obey, meaning those who you're supposed to obey, in that which is possible, in that which you have the ability to obey, right? In that which you have the ability to obey, right? So if your parents tell you to do something and you're not able to do it, you try your best. If you're not able to do it, you're not sinful. Because of this other hadith, عَلَيْكُمُ السَّمْعُ وَالطَّاعَ فِي مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, in that which you are able to do, right? So ability here is important. And there's another wording of the same hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says, لَا طَاعَةَ لِمَخْلُوقٍ فِي مَعْصِيَةِ الْخَالِقِ. There is no obedience to a created being in the disobedience of the Creator. In the disobedience of the Creator. The next hadith is the hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr, or his father Amr ibn al-As, radiyallahu an. And this is in Bukhari and Muslim. And also Abu Hurairah narrates this hadith. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا حكم الحاكم فاجتهد وأصاب فله أجران وإذا حكم فاجتهد فأخطأ فله أجر واحد. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم says that when the Muslim judge decides on a verdict in a case, and he does his best to come to the right conclusion. He does what is known as ijtihad. So ijtihad is basically where a qualified Muslim judge, he basically tries his best to come to the correct ruling on a certain matter. So a case comes to him and he tries his best. He looks at the evidence, he looks at everything, and it's not like he just out of the blue says, this is my verdict. Right? No, there's a process. He puts all his effort into it to try to figure out what should be the correct ruling in this case. This is called ijtihad. What is this called? Ijtihad. All right, so this is called ijtihad. And all right, so the Muslim judge, he does ijtihad. The Prophet ﷺ says, if he does that, and then he gets the ruling correct, فَأَصَابَ, how many rewards does he get? 2. فَلَهُ أَجْرَانِ. And if he rules in a case after doing ijtihad, but he gets it wrong, how many rewards does he get? Or does he get any? He gets 1. He gets 1 reward. That's what the Prophet ﷺ says here. And so what we learn from this hadith is that either way, a Muslim judge is rewarded. The one who tries his best, right? The one who tries his best. And the same applies to our Muslim scholars, right? It's not only a Muslim judge in a court that has cases that are brought to him, but also in the case of our Muslim scholars who basically have to figure out what is a correct ruling on certain things in our deen, especially contemporary issues and new issues. And so the Muslim scholars, the same thing. They do what is known as ijtihad, right? They do what is known as ijtihad. Now, in the case of both the Muslim judge and the Muslim scholar, we said, what is the condition here? What is the condition for him to get either 1 reward or 2 rewards? What is the condition? Okay, but before that.
This is the one we did.
Yeah. A very important condition. Yes, of course, ikhlas, but even before ikhlas. A person can be mukhlis, he can have ikhlas, but he's missing this condition. Being qualified. Being qualified. Right? You can't go into something without being qualified. We already spoke about that. Right? Likewise, in the case of being a Muslim judge and a Muslim scholar. To do ijtihad, you have to be qualified for ijtihad. Not anyone can say, I'll do ijtihad, and yet he's not qualified. He hasn't gone through years of learning and training to reach that point. And that's the difference between a true Muslim judge or Muslim scholar and a person who just follows his desires, who makes it seem as if he's a scholar and he's not. And the Shaykh also mentions a very important point here, that a Muslim judge, he cannot be biased. He cannot be biased. For example, a case comes before him where it's a relative of his, right? Part of ijtihad means he is looking for the truth. He's being impartial. He's not looking to favor one party over the other. Right? That's part of the whole ijtihad process. And what we learn from this hadith is something very important, that our Muslim scholars throughout our Islamic history, even if they may have made mistakes, even if they may have been wrong on certain issues, and sometimes it's a clear mistake, it's clearly they were wrong, right? We don't attack them. We do not blame them. We don't criticize them. That this person is an ignorant, deviant. He doesn't know what he's talking about. No. As long as they are respected ulama who are qualified to do ijtihad, then what is the Prophet ﷺ saying? That at least they go away with one reward. If they're wrong, at least they do go away with one reward. Finally, we'll cover one last hadith, and this is the hadith of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, and this is in Sahih Muslim. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لو يعطى الناس بدعواهم لادعى رجال دماء قوم وأموالهم ولكن اليمين على المدعي ولكن اليمين على المدعى عليه ولكن اليمين على المدعى عليه. And here the Prophet ﷺ says, if the people are given based on their claims, if people are given based on their claims, then there will be men who will claim the blood of people and also their wealth. What does that mean, that they'll claim the blood and the wealth of people? What that means is they'll say that so-and-so murdered, and so we want to kill him. And he stole, and we want to take this money back. Right? That's what the Prophet ﷺ is saying. If people were just given based on their claims, then this is what will happen. Right? Today you come to me and you say so-and-so, he stole $500 off of me. If I just go based on that claim and say, come, give me $500 so I can give it back to the person, if that ends up being the case always, then everyone's going to claim whatever they want. Everyone's going to claim whatever they want. So then the Prophet ﷺ said, however, those who are rejecting the claim, right, the accused, what do they have to do? Al-Yamin. Al-Yamin ala al-Mudda'a alayh. Meaning, they have to swear by Allah that they are innocent. They have to swear by Allah that they're innocent. Now another version of this hadith, and the Shaykh mentions it, and this is in al-Bayhaqi, al-Bayyina ala al-Mudda'i wal-Yamin ala man ankar. Al-Bayyinatu ala al-Mudda'i wal-Yaminu ala man ankar. That evidence has to be brought by the claimant, and the accused, he has to swear that he's innocent. He has to swear that he is innocent. And so basically, what this hadith is telling us is how basically cases are resolved in the Sharia, right? Where you have a Muslim court, you have a Muslim judge. This is the basis. This is the foundation, right? And this is the very first thing that any person who is trained to be a Muslim judge, this is the very first thing that they learn: how to judge in cases. Whoever is making a claim, he has to bring evidence, right? It's not the other way around, right? The one who is saying I'm innocent, you don't tell him, you bring your proof, right? You know, if someone is saying that so and so stole something off of me, you don't tell the one who is accused, prove your innocence. Obviously, he's going to say, I'm innocent, right? But you don't say to him, prove you're innocent. Instead, you say to the accuser, you prove that your claim is true, right? And this shows us, again, the justice of Islam and the Sharia, right? Our deen is a complete way of life. You know, our deen has taught us everything. And our deen is based on justice. It is based on justice. And so, if the claimant cannot bring proof, right? He doesn't have evidence. He made the claim, but he's not able to bring evidence. Then the judge, what does he do? He turns to the accused and he says, look, he doesn't have evidence. Now you swear by Allah that you're innocent. Right? This is the process. He first asks the claimant to bring your evidence. He can't bring evidence, right? So then he turns to the accused and he says, he asks him to make a yameen. Yameen is basically to take an oath with Allah, to take an oath by the name of Allah that he is innocent. And so this is where we'll stop. And we'll continue next week, inshallah, on to hadith number 59, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. If there's any questions, you guys can ask. Mhm.
The last hadith, so the person dead brought an evidence.
Mhm.
Does the second person has to also make yamin, or it's like worthless?
It depends on the evidence, right? If the evidence is clear cut, right? If the evidence is clear cut, then that's it. The judge, he, gives his verdict. But if it's, not that strong, the evidence, then, and the person is still saying, I'm innocent, then he asks him to take a yameen.
So, for the second hadith, so is Islam based on the idea that a person is innocent until they're proven guilty?
Mhm. Yeah. So the idea that a person is innocent until proven guilty, this is an Islamic concept. Mhm.
And what about when that person, a suspect, gets jailed or detained until the ruling is carried out? That's also kind of punishment. So, are they allowed to jail that person or detain that
Mhm.
person during that
Yeah.
case?
Yeah, so again, this is something that is discussed in detail in books of fiqh. The question was that if someone is accused of certain crime, are we allowed to detain him? Because we said the person is innocent until proven guilty. So if he says, I'm innocent, are we still allowed to hold him, detain him, put him in prison until the court proceedings, etc.? The answer is, this goes back to what the judge sees as being, fair with regards to this individual. So if he feels that this person is a dangerous person and, he could cause harm, potential harm, then yes, we're allowed to hold on to him until the verdict comes. But if he sees that no, that's not the case, then he can let him go, right? It all goes back to discretion, the discretion of the judge. And we see this. We see this in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. So, for example, you had, there are two examples from the life of the Prophet ﷺ. The first is the example of his own wife, Aisha radiallahu anha, in that whole slander that Allah mentions in Surah An-Nur. So the munafiqun accuse her of something, and there's no evidence, right? But it's an accusation made. So here she could be innocent, she could be guilty. And there's no way for the Prophet ﷺ to know unless Allah tells him. And Allah did not clarify anything for more than a month. No revelation came, right? Finally, the revelation came declaring her innocent. So that whole period of time, the Prophet ﷺ did not, punish her, right? But at the same time, he stayed away from her, right? And she mentions, the whole experience, the whole ordeal, and the difficult days that those were for her. The other example is the example of Ka'b ibn Ubay, Ka'b radiallahu anhu, when he stayed away. He did not go out with the Muslims in the Battle of Tabuk. And when the Prophet ﷺ came back, and the munafiqun, the hypocrites, who also did not go, they came with all their excuses. And Ka'b radiallahu anhu, along with two other companions, were truthful. They said, Ya Rasulullah, we do not have any excuse. So now, what is the Prophet ﷺ going to do with them? They did something wrong. Everyone had to go in that battle, and they stayed behind. What they did was a crime. So again, the Prophet ﷺ did not detain them, nor did he treat them like everyone else. He actually asked all the Muslims to boycott these three companions, and it was a very difficult time for them. And again, Ka'b narrates the whole story. This is in Sahih al-Bukhari. And in the end, after more than a month, 40 days, Allah reveals ayat, in support of them. So this shows us that it goes back to, what the leader or the judge sees as being right, and what to do, what course of action we should take with someone who's been accused, until we decide their innocence. So in the case of Ka'b, the Prophet ﷺ ordered that they should be boycotted, right? In the case of a Muslim judge, he may see in the best interests of the Muslims to put this person in prison to detain him until we have the court proceedings, etc.
What if there isn't enough resources to make a predetermination on whether they will be jailed or whether they will be free? Is there a preset criteria?
No, there's no set criteria. It's just, the judge looks at the individual. What kind of person is he? Based on various indications. And they use the same process here in the West. Some people, they let them out on bail. Others, no, they don't let them out on bail because they're too dangerous, for example. Any other questions? Okay, we'll conclude here then, inshallah, and we'll continue next week. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa sallallahu wa sallim ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wassalamu